Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to the United Nations World Data Forum 2023, to the Talk 207 on Room 4. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Raul Parra, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm the Open Government Director of the Transparency Institute in Nuevo León, Mexico, and I'll be presenting our our speakers, today's speakers. We have three extraordinary people that have different projects on data and data usage. In the first place, we have Jess Raya from the University of Virginia. She's an assistant professor of data science, and she'll be talking about data for the night, ethical guidances for data use and sharing in 24 cities. Let's give it an applause, please. And in the second place, we have Maria Teresa Treviño Fernandez. She is the president of the State Institute of Transparency, Access to Information, and Protection of Data in Nuevo León, Mexico. She's my boss. Please give her an applause. And in the third place, we have Jean Holm from the city of Los Angeles. She's a deputy mayor, and she'll be talking about bringing youth to data leadership, the Los Angeles Data Science Federation. She'll be online, but let's give it an applause. And today we're going to start this session with Jessie Raya. Once again, welcome, and go ahead with your presentation.
Hi, can you hear me? Hey. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm very happy to see all of you. And today, I'll be talking a little bit about this project we've been conducting, mostly in Montreal, Canada, but with lessons from many other places, and hopefully it would be useful for other cities as well. So a little bit of background about like who I am, where I came from, because it helps shape the work that I do. And yeah, in terms of geographies, it's very important for me. I'm originally from Brazil, and I live in Canada, and I'm based in the US right now. So this kind of transnational perspectives of data science and the social implications of data science is very important for me and the work that I do. And it also, I'm very lucky, I would say, to do research, but also policy-oriented work that has this connection, especially with local governments. So thinking how to translate scientific knowledge to broader audiences as well, especially in government and civil society organizations. And I'll show you a little bit of this. And thinking about how can we better frame ethics in a way, and that's one of my biggest challenges right now, teaching and doing research in responsible data science, as we call it, at UVA, and thinking about ethics in a really broad way. So we are considering the principles and the morality behind it in many, many decades of discussion about ethics and technology, but also several issues of policy, rights, especially from the public interest perspective, digital rights, privacy, data protection, and all these regulatory frameworks helping shape how we see ethics and ethical guidelines as well, and governance, to how can we develop better governance for responsible data science projects and deployment of any kind of data-centric projects, especially in our cities. And we see data science in a way that combines what we call value, the human components, the social components of it, combined with technical creative skills as well. So over the years, I worked a lot in smart cities from critical perspective, and what I will show you today is nighttime governance and a little bit of context about what I'm talking about. So this is a collaboration between different organizations, different funding agencies, and again, I think I was really lucky because I got to work directly with the city government. And while I was at McGill University, I also was appointed a member of the Night Council in Montreal. And it sounds really cool, like a cool title to be part of a night council. And I'll talk a little bit more about what night mayors and night councils are and why they're important for our cities. So one of the things that I've been trying to work with in this context is open data. Can we have better, improve our open data policies and our portals and how we talk about data, what to make public, what should not be public, how to do open data for cities and for the night in a responsible way. Uh, and here I talk about all sorts of urban data, a really expensive way, all these data-centric projects in our cities. It's cities that are already collecting and using and sharing massive amounts of data, as it is the case of Montreal. But also, how can we connect this agenda of open data, smartness, AI, with nighttime governance? That's something that has been around for a while as well, and having in mind that we should safeguard human rights in the digital environment as well, especially privacy, and think about data protection. And this field that we call night studies, it's relatively recent, I would say 15, 20 years, thinking about night as a space, a territory, and also time in our cities. And usually we associate the night with rest and sleep, or parties, noise, all sorts of the imaginary around nightlife. And I think it's very important to think about night in a broader way as well. So we're thinking about this conflict, really prominent over the last years, about noise, public order, safety at night, and it's closely related to data issues, as I'll show you, and the emergence of all these governance mechanisms like night mayors in the first city to have an appointed and elected night mayor was Amsterdam, and then many cities followed. Today we have over 50 cities around the world with some kind of governance mechanism for the night. Mostly still located in the global north, but that doesn't mean we don't have. We did have, like in Latin America and other countries in the global south as well. So cities are struggling, trying to think, how can we foster a vibrant, creative culture and vibrant nightlife in our cities while safeguarding rights and also creating better governance mechanisms. And there's this debate in academia, but also a growing interest in night cultures, in advocacy and policy as well. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that doing studies and talking as like this international community, how we did not have much access to data about night. We couldn't even understand the impacts of the pandemic and the shutdowns that affected nightlife so much and nighttime economy properly. It was really hard to find the information that we need. And so this is part of the project, trying to understand nightlife as an ecosystem. That night is way beyond just like clubs or noise or safety issues. And here we have all sorts of like all the food, access to food, entertainment, all sorts of formal and informal works that work overnight, from night shift workers, hospital workers, cultural institutions, museums, libraries that are open at night. Some cities have specific programs for offering access to cultural institutions at night as well. Unhoused communities, public order, lighting, noise, public transit is a big thing. How many cities we have with 24 hours metro systems or bus systems, for example? Can you really navigate the city at night? In all this, we don't have much information and data available to us. The departments, they often have the data, but it's not consistently published and open and available. So this, we designed it for Montreal, but it could hopefully be replicated in other cities as well, and emerged from conversations we had around. This is available for free to download, all the chapters, when we start to think about post-pandemic recovery for cities, and then data became a big issue in this conversation as well. And we wrote the study for Montreal, the case study here. In here, this list is from 2 years ago, so it's not completely up to date. We still need to compile a new one showing all the mechanisms that we have in different countries. And I always like to say there are things that are not here, things that existed from a few years in Latin America, for example. And these are some of the initiatives we were part of. as part of the Night Council at Montreal 24/24. So we worked closer to the city to develop a nightlife policy. I was in these conversations about open data, but we also consulted with the residents, and we tried to understand the data that was already available for us, and also did all sorts of campaigns at the time of the pandemic to raise awareness of the importance of nightlife as a vital part of city life for everyone, talking to different communities and understand how night can be a space from a space of care and community, but also culture and knowledge, and how can we improve this in the post-pandemic context as well. And thinking here a little bit about night data in the city of Montreal, 4 million inhabitants, it's an island in a river, so it has its own challenge, really cold for many months of the year, brutal winters, and it has specificities about language, politics, access to information, digitization, and it is a city that received awards and has been known for a hub for innovation and the game industry, and right now the AI industry in Canada as well, with lots of governmental funding, for example. And some questions that we ask ourselves in this process were first, like, who is telling our stories? What kind of stories and communities are not visible in these data sets? Because lots of communities who inhabit the night do not necessarily want to be visible, and I'll get to that in a minute. We try to have this very expensive notion of data, because when we don't have official numbers and the authority that official numbers have, as we've been seeing here these days, like stats and census and all the power that official numbers hold, when we don't have those numbers, we rely a lot on community-based data collection, and then we are subject to different methodologies, to how accessible this data is, to issues of how the questions were asked or not asked, who is included and who is excluded from data collection processes. So we are trying to consider community-based data collection here as well, and trying to work towards opening up more data from the city, at the city level and from the city government as well. And in 2019, Montreal won the award for Smart City Challenge from the Canadian government, so they received funding to further develop this agenda in the city, so data-centric projects are a central point here. They established this Montreal in Common, a social data hub to collect and manage data from different organizations in the city, trying to have a better understanding of the needs and interests of all residents and the stakeholders in the local government. And in 2020, they drafted the Digital Data Charter with principles about ethics and how to do open data responsibly. And they opened up a public consultation for all people interested in contributing to this conversation at the time, and we contributed to that as well, including criticizing the process, because it was not very open, I would say. It was, hey, send it by email or just use this tiny box with 140 characters. It's less than a tweet these days on what do you think should be changed here. And several stakeholders prepare like more length contributions on how we could advance ethics and responsibility for open data in the city. So we do have a framework for this discussion at the time, and we do have an innovation lab, but these things, as we see, we have all this data, and all the nights are still kind of invisible in the data sets that we have, and this, we need to keep in mind that all these solutions focus on big data. They might cause more harm than improve people's livelihoods, and this is something that in our school we've been trying to think about critically often on how can we have innovation and openness balanced with privacy and responsibility at the same time. So we found several challenges when trying to have this conversation, and many times we sat down with different departments in the city government, from the public transit agency to the police department, economic development. It was basically knocking on people's door virtually at the time to say like, hey, what kind of data sets do you have, and can we make them available? Because there's a huge demand for understanding the city at night. And often we receive like a no, or problems of interoperability, problems of confidentiality. So it's just, it takes a long time. And if you work with local governments, you know how much time sometimes it takes to build these bridges and advance some agendas. And also we have all these communities that not necessarily want to be there. It's a city with historical inequalities as well. And even the regulatory frameworks are not necessarily clear. We have plenty of gray areas in there as well. And there's no one size fits all solution. So we were really trying to understand the specific challenge for the city and seeing like what can become potentially a best practice in there. And there are plenty of opportunities to think about better policy and governance for data in cities. We can improve services accuracy and resource allocation. We can think about climate justice, and several of the sustainable development goals would be part of this process as well. And that's why we're really trying to open up this conversation. And I'm always interested to talk to people in other cities, understand their experience, because we did try to build this process collaboratively with different stakeholders in Montreal. We participated in all the working groups from the city. The city appointed a night and noise commissioner in 2020. And so we have this very intensive, several months long process of consulting specialists, talking to different groups, talking to the residents, and trying to understand what do you need for the nightlife to be better in Montreal. And the obvious came up, like better public transit options that run overnight, because people who live far away from the city center cannot access museums or cinemas or services, hospitals at night as well. So like having a more robust, consistent public transit, but also cultural options and things that are not only located in specific areas of the city. And in terms of data, people voiced their concerns about how the city was going to make the information available for everybody. And when we decided to request a data inventory about what do the city have about night, they just sent us, this is a one-page PDF, and if you work with data, you would see like, this is not like machine readable, this is not open, we have to request, and some they are like in the inventory, but will not share with us. So we've been like facing several difficulties in this process to even get the data, and you can imagine our frustration when you got a one-page PDF with the data sets and what they're supposed to be. And since then, we've been mapping all the open data portals, federal level, province level, and city level to understand what is available, what are the gaps, how can we improve that, and listen to the affected communities, how they would like to see data governance being made in this process, ensure that no harmful technology is deployed, especially now that we talk so much about facial recognition technology at night in surveillance and safety in certain spaces. So that was another issue that people raised. And how can we make this data available, accessible, and reusable in a responsible and timely way, also integrating with the knowledge that the community already have collected in terms of data. And when we did this report commissioned by the city government, trying to understand the nightlife in the city, and especially because they want to fund and support all sorts of initiatives that not necessarily had the permits and license because they cost a lot of money. And the city, on the one hand, they really wanted to support different initiatives in the city. And on the other hand, all these communities were really suspicious and thinking like, we don't know if you want to be included or visible. So in terms of ethics on how people want to be represented, it's very important too. And then we had to find ways to show the city government more or less the areas in the city and the needs and the requests without pinpointing places that might be irregularly operating. So trying to find this balance and listening to the communities, it will look different in different places. And then so we've been learning a lot in this process, but like how to implement this in a responsible way, what kind of ethical guidances we should use, going back to the first framework of responsible data science. So really trying to look at all these different aspects of responsible governance, and hopefully like the lessons we learn we can share. And if you work with this, we would love to listen to your experiences in your city, work together. And there's like a really nice international community of people working night and with data nowadays. So we would like to connect and happy to answer to any questions you might have. And if you want to participate in these projects, listen more about the Montreal case, or if your city is working with this and you have lessons that could be helpful and useful for us as well, that would be great in talking about open data in this 24-hour cycle. I'm more than happy to connect with you and all in here. Thank you very much.
Let's give it applause to Jesse Raya from the University of Virginia.